Hi guy, thanks for your watching my video. Beyond the Gates reveal that Naomi Hawthorne isn't hiding this secret out of selfishness or cruelty. And she certainly isn't doing it because she enjoys deceiving the people who love her. The bitter irony is that she is lying because she loves them too much. Because she has forced herself into becoming the last shield standing between her family and yet another devastating blow. And sometimes, what breaks a strong woman isn't the pain she carries in her own body, but the moment she realizes her truth might become someone else's burden. Naomi has endured far too many dark days lately. She has watched Anita Dupree fight breast cancer with a pride so fierce it almost looks like invincibility, even when exhaustion is etched into every breath. She has watched the Dupree family cling to normalcy like it is a life raft, smiling too brightly, speaking too gently as if the right tone of voice could somehow soften fate. And then comes the terrifying idea that this illness may not be random at all, that it may be inherited, passed down like an invisible curse written into the bloodline. That knowledge doesn't just frighten Naomi, it steals her permission to be vulnerable. Because she isn't only afraid of cancer, she is afraid of what cancer does to families. When it becomes a legacy, she is afraid of guilt attaching itself to the women she loves most. Of Anita and the older generations turning their compassion inward until it becomes blame. Of them looking at Naomi with a grief that feels like confession. Naomi understands that kind of weight. She understands it too well. She knows the bone-deep fatigue of living through a crisis no one can fix, only survive. Holding their breath from one appointment to the next. So when her genetic test results appeared and her instincts screamed that nothing about them was normal, Naomi made a choice that felt like survival. She chose silence. No one needed another fear. No one needed another number, another verdict, another future marked in red. But Naomi isn't as good at lying as she wants to believe. She can arrange words. She can summon a smile at the right moment. She can steady her voice through family conversations and pretend she is simply tired, simply busy, simply fine. Yet her body betrays her, again and again, in small ways that compound into something unmistakable. It betrays her in the pauses that last a beat too long. In the way her gaze slips away when someone's concern becomes too direct. In the shallow breath she takes when the words genetic or inherited or test are mentioned. She is trying to keep the atmosphere from collapsing. Trying to keep the family from shattering under the weight of one more reality. But the normal she performs is strained, and strain creates cracks. Naomi refuses to become the center of a new panic. She refuses to let Anita already in the trenches of chemotherapy start questioning whether she handed something poisonous to the granddaughter she adores. Naomi refuses to watch her family's grief turn into a courtroom, with love on trial and blame circling the room like vultures. So she swallows the truth. She pushes it down so deeply she almost convinces herself it will stay there, as if refusing to name the danger will keep it from defining her life. Except marriage does not survive on what is never spoken. And Jacob Hawthorne begins to sense something is wrong, not because he can point to a specific lie, not because he has evidence or certainty, but because he can feel the woman he loves shifting away from him. In the Friday episode, Jacob may not have recognized that Naomi was lying about her BTG gene status, but he recognizes the change in her posture toward him. He has known Naomi long enough to understand that she isn't fine in the way she's trying to prove. Jacob is not a man who listens only to words. He listens to silence. He reads distance. He notices the subtle recalibration in the way Naomi moves through their shared space. The way she speeds up to avoid a conversation, the way she redirects a question like it's a threat. The way her answers have become polished and shallow, like she has rehearsed them to protect herself. And what terrifies Jacob most isn't even the possibility that Naomi is hiding something. It's the growing realization that Naomi is learning how to live without needing him. That realization hits Jacob hard because not long ago they were doing so well. They had started therapy. They had begun rebuilding what had been strained and damaged, learning how to speak without turning every sentence into a spark. They had pieced trust back together through honesty, patience, and the simple discipline of not running away when things got uncomfortable. Their relationship felt strong again, solid enough that Jacob believed Naomi would come to him no matter what happened. So when Naomi suddenly closes off, he can't help the sting of disappointment. Not because he suspects betrayal or a change of heart, but because he feels himself being shut out of the place where he is supposed to belong. He had been Naomi's safe place in the storms before, and now she seems to be turning herself into a fortress, locking every door, leaving Jacob outside with no key. The distance doesn't roar. It doesn't explode. It simply grows, quiet and steady, until Jacob begins to wonder whether he is losing her even while she is still standing right in front of him. Meanwhile, Naomi is trapped between two opposing fears, each one sharp enough to cut her open. On one side is the fear that telling the truth will break her family at the exact moment. They are already barely holding together. She is terrified of becoming the reason their fragile hope collapses, terrified of turning an already painful chapter into something unbearable. On the other side is the fear that if she keeps lying, she will lose Jacobnet because he will rage. Not because he will punish her, but because he will eventually tire of loving someone who keeps vanishing into shadow. Naomi can't bear either outcome, and so she chooses the path that many women choose when they feel cornered. She throws herself into work. She dives into work like it is a form of anesthesia. Like staying busy will mute the truth humming in her bloodstream. Work becomes the place she can control outcomes, measure progress, solve problems. Work becomes the safe space where no one looks at her with eyes soft enough to crack her defenses, where no one asks if she's okay in a way that demands honesty. But to Jacob, this is the loudest warning sign of all. He knows Naomi. He knows she runs to work when she is trying not to fall apart. And the more she runs, the more Jacob feels something slipping through his fingers. Jacob tries to do the right thing. He doesn't corner her. He doesn't transform uncertainty into accusation. He doesn't demand confession like he has the right to interrogate her pain. Instead, he does what a man who loves his wife is supposed to do. He encourages her to keep going to therapy. He reminds her of what they promised each other in those sessions. He tries to keep them anchored to the progress they fought for. Jacob wants them to hold onto the vow they made with their actions. Not just their words that they wouldn't go silent, that they wouldn't carry everything alone, that they wouldn't leave the other person abandoned in the middle of fear. But Naomi refuses, abruptly, and that refusal lands like a quiet slap across Jacob's faith. It's a simple no, yet it detonates everything he thought they were building. Jacob can't understand why Naomi is suddenly afraid of something that once brought them closer. He can't see what Naomi sees, that therapy would mean speaking the truth. Therapy would mean facing the future. Therapy would mean answering questions about health, risk, family, and decisions Naomi is barely able to look at herself. Because Naomi is hiding something bigger than anxiety. If she admits she carries the BRCA gene, her life changes permanently. Her future becomes a map of possibilities she never wanted to navigate. The weight isn't just medical. It's psychological. It's emotional. It's existential. And above all, it drags the topic of children into the light, one future Jacob may imagine with uncomplicated happiness, the one future Naomi now sees as a minefield of moral terror. Naomi isn't just afraid she might get sick. She's afraid of passing fear down to someone else. She is afraid of having a child and watching that child grow up beneath the long shadow of genetic risk, of seeing innocence fused to uncertainty. Naomi is afraid of looking into her child's face and wondering if she handed them a lifelong question that will never have a clean answer. If Jacob ever suggests having another baby, Naomi could refuse with unwavering firmness. But she wouldn't be able to tell him why. She wouldn't be able to say, "I don't want to pass this on," without admitting the lie she has been guarding like a weapon. And that is where the marriage becomes dangerous. Because Jacob does not know the truth. He can only interpret Naomi's future decisions through the lens of what he believes their life is. He might think Naomi doesn't want children because she no longer believes in them. He might think she is quietly withdrawing from the marriage. He might think she is punishing him for something he doesn't even understand. Jacob isn't an unreasonable man, but he is a man with limits. He can be patient, but he can't spend his whole life begging for access to his own wife's heart. He can be gentle, but he will still break if he keeps reaching for Naomi and finding only walls. And Naomi knows that. She knows Jacob doesn't explode easily. But she also knows the slow erosion of trust is often more fatal than any sudden fight. Naomi's silence grows heavier with every day she keeps it. Jacob's concern sharpens with every day he notices her slipping further away. The tragedy is that Naomi is not trying to hurt him. She is trying to protect him. Yet the protection itself is becoming the thing that wounds him most. The tension surrounding them is not the kind that fills a room with shouting. It's the kind that drains warmth from the air 1 degree at a time, until even their ordinary moments feel cold. It's an atmosphere that settles over them like mist, subtle and suffocating, turning their normal routines into performances. Their shared meals become exercises in restraint, Naomi smiling at just the right times, Jacob pretending to be convinced because he doesn't want to scare her. Their touches become hesitant, careful, as if both of them are unsure whether the other person is truly there. Naomi looks at Jacob and sees a man who would stay with her through every nightmare. And that loyalty makes her ache in a way she can't describe, because she knows she is betraying it with every unspoken truth. Jacob looks at Naomi and sees a woman disappearing from his embrace. And he can't figure out how to save her without pushing her into anger. They are standing on opposite ends of the same bridge, both wanting to cross. But every step makes the structure tremble because the secret beneath them is too heavy. And the cruelest part is that Naomi still believes she is doing the right thing. She still convinces herself that if she can just hold the lie long enough, everything will stabilize. Anita will survive chemotherapy. The family will regain its rhythm. The laughter will return without sounding forced. Naomi will figure out how to handle this alone. But lies don't stay still. They grow. They spread. They turn every loving glance into suspicion, every gentle question into pressure. Naomi isn't only hiding BRCA anymore, Ash is hiding fear, hiding panic, hiding the true version of herself. And while she believes she is keeping the family from collapsing, she does not see that the first thing cracking under the strain is her marriage. Jacob may not know what Naomi is hiding, but he cannot ignore the feeling that he is being pushed out of his own life. He will start paying closer attention. He will begin asking more questions. He will notice the patterns Naomi thinks she's concealing. And Naomi will start fearing those questions the way people fear sharp objects near open wounds. Because all it will take is one question asked in the right way. One glance at the wrong document. One moment when Naomi's control slips. And everything she has been protecting will collapse in a single breath. At that point, it won't only be about whether Naomi carries the BRCA gene. It will be about the deeper rupture underneath, the fact that Naomi didn't trust Jacob enough to let him carry the truth with her. If the secret comes out, Jacob will face two shocks at once: the fear for Naomi's health and the pain of being excluded. Naomi knows that, and her fear doubles. She feels trapped in a corridor where every door leads to loss. Tell the truth and the family hurts. Keep the truth and Jacob hurts. And if Jacob hurts, Naomi will hurt twice over because she will know she did it to him. She will know she created the distance she is now terrified of crossing. The biggest question is no longer how long Naomi can keep the secret, but how long she can survive the consequences of it. Because the truth always finds its way back, especially in a family already living in vigilance, where every small shift feels suspicious, where illness has taught them to watch each other too closely. Naomi may believe she controls the story, but the story is beginning to control her. And Jacob may not wait until Naomi feels ready. He won't break her with violence or rage, but he will force her to stop running. Because he cannot keep loving a woman who keeps turning him into a stranger. And just when Naomi thinks she has hidden it well enough, long enough, carefully enough, Jacob has a moment that seems ordinary, almost harmless. Yet it changes the direction of everything. He looks at Naomi and suddenly understands the air between them is too heavy. The silence too deliberate, the distance too practiced. He realizes there is a secret sitting right in the middle of their marriage. Density has stolen the room's ability to breathe. And this time, Jacob doesn't back away. This time, he decides Naomi will not outrun him again. Jacob Hawthorne had tried to convince himself he was imagining things, that Naomi's strange shifts in mood and behavior were simply the natural aftermath of a family being dragged through fear of cancer, fear of chemotherapy, fear of inheritance, fear of a diagnosis that could echo from one generation to the next. He told himself that any marriage would wobble under that kind of pressure, that any woman would sometimes retreat when the world felt too loud. He tried to be the kind of husband who didn't interrogate pain, the kind who understood that love is not always about demanding answers, but about standing close enough for someone to breathe again. Still, there are instincts the mind cannot reason away. There are anxieties that do not shrink simply because you want them to. They gather quietly, like sand trapped inside a shoe, until even the smallest step becomes uncomfortable, until every ordinary day begins to rub raw. Jacob had been living with that discomfort for days, maybe weeks, ever since Naomi started changing in a way she believed she could hide. But that felt glaring to him like a long sigh stretching across a silent room. She smiled more than usual, yet the smile looked like paint over a crack. She spoke smoothly, but there was always a hollow pause between her words and her eyes, as if she was constantly monitoring what might slip out. And what frightened Jacob the most was not the possibility that Naomi had a secret. It was the possibility that she could keep that secret while still looking at him every day, still touching him, still sharing a life beside him, as if he did not deserve the truth. Not long ago, Naomi had celebrated a negative BRCA result in front of the family. The atmosphere in that moment felt like gentle rain after a drought of her own grabbing onto relief. With desperate gratitude, as if one piece of good news could slow down the ruthless train of fate, Jacob held Naomi and believed, for a few precious hours, that they were safe from one more nightmare. That at least this chapter would not become another blade slicing into a family already bleeding from Anita's battle. That night, Jacob and Naomi were close in a way that felt rare and deeply human. Not just desire or routine, but the tenderness of two people who had survived a storm and needed to cling to each other to prove they were still alive. Jacob thought it was the moment they truly returned to each other. The moment Naomi would stop bracing for impact, stop running, stop turning him into an outsider. He thought love had finally won. But the truth is often cruel in the smallest ways. It doesn't always arrive like an explosion. Sometimes it arrives like a single sheet of paper slipping to the floor, silent, cold, and devastating enough to destroy a fragile hope. Naomi rushed out the next morning. She didn't do anything dramatic or suspicious on purpose. It was just one careless moment. A simple mistake anyone could make when their mind is overloaded with what must remain hidden. That haste caused her to drop a document she should have guarded like a ticking bomb. Jacob saw it before he even understood what it was. He bent down to pick it up, still wrapped in the soft emotional haze of a morning after a rare peaceful night. But within seconds, the piece inside him was ripped open like a curtain torn from its hooks. The words on the report struck him directly in the chest. Naomi's name, BRCA, and the result, positive. There are moments when people claim time stops. But Jacob understood time never truly stops. Suddenly the heart freezes. His first emotion was not rage. It was shock so sharp it stole his breath, like being shoved headfirst into icy water. He stared at the report again and again, as if his eyes were malfunctioning. As if this might belong to someone else, mixed in by mistake. But it was too clear, too exact, impossible to misread. And then another pain rose up, sharper than the fear of illness itself. Naomi had lied. Naomi had allowed him to believe in a false joy. Naomi had let the entire family exhale while she carried a truth that could rewrite every plan they ever made. Jacob stood in the middle of the room, holding the paper like it weighed 100 pounds. He couldn't immediately name what was happening inside him because his feelings collided in ways that felt brutal. Part of him wanted to run after Naomi instantly, to pull her into his arms, to ask how frightened she must have been to choose silence, to understand why the woman he loved had decided to face something this huge without leaning on him. But another part of him was wounded in a quieter, deeper place cut straight through the pride and dignity of being her husband. Naomi didn't just hide a medical fact. She hid something they should have carried together, and by doing so, she turned Jacob into an outsider in his own marriage. He began to replay every clue he had once tried to dismiss as paranoia. Naomi burying herself in work like it was an escape route. Naomi refusing therapy with a suddenness that felt like instinctive self-defense. Naomi dodging his questions when he got too close to her emotions. Naomi holding herself too tightly sometimes, as if her body was bracing for impact. All of it made sense now. All of it had a reason. All of it had a logic that cut Jacob even deeper. Because being right didn't feel like relief, it felt like confirmation that the ground beneath him had been cracking for a long time. And honestly, there is something about this that makes it impossible to feel only one emotion toward Naomi. It is the kind of situation that forces you into contradiction. The kind that makes you ache for her and resent her at the same time. Because maybe she believed she was being noble, that hiding the truth was a way of protecting others. But in a marriage, nobility can sometimes look like control. It becomes a decision made alone in the name of love that strips the other person of the right to share the burden. Jacob didn't want to be the husband who was only allowed to know the happy updates. He didn't want to be loved in a way that excluded him from the pain. And to me, that is the core tragedy here. Naomi thought she was shielding Jacob from fear, but she was actually forcing him to face something even more brutal, terrifying possibility. That their love was not safe enough for her to trust. Jacob moved through the house like a man learning how to breathe again. He wanted to shout, but nothing came. He wanted to cry, but his throat felt locked. In his mind, he saw the night before, Naomi's body pressed close to his, her warmth in his arms. His belief that they were finally resting inside something honest. Now that memory became a bruise, not because it was completely fake, but because it was coated in the truth Naomi had still been hiding while she let him touch her, hold her, believe in her. Jacob didn't know what that meant. He didn't know if Naomi had felt guilt while she kissed him, if she had been counting time. Terrified of being exposed, telling herself she just needed to survive one more night. The not knowing became its own punishment. Suddenly, Jacob was trapped inside a decision no one prepares you for when you promise forever. Confront Naomi or stay silent. If he confronted her, he might destroy the thin calm she built just to keep standing. He might push her into panic, drive her deeper into self-protection, make her feel cornered. But if he stayed silent, he would become an accomplice to the lie that had already wounded him. And Jacob understood that silence inside a marriage is never harmless. It is a seed. It grows into doubt. It expands into distance. It kills intimacy not through physical betrayal but through the betrayal of trust. Yet Jacob also couldn't ignore the fear embedded in that single word, positive. A positive BRCA result was not just a line of text. It was a future marked by uncertainty. It was a life of monitoring, tests, decisions that carry weight even when no one is watching. It was the feeling of living inside a body that might betray you. And Naomi had carried all of that alone. The thought tightened Jacob's chest. Because no matter how furious he felt, he still loved her. He still saw her as the woman who had survived storms beside him. That's why Jacob's anger could never be pure. It was always mixed with compassion, mixed with dread, mixed with one relentless question: how lonely did Naomi have to be to do this? But then another thought cut through him with sickening precision. If Naomi could lie about this, what else could she lie about? And that is where the lie becomes truly dangerous. It stops being a single secret and becomes a precedent. A crack spreading across everything Jacob thought he understood. He didn't want to become the kind of husband who searched for hidden meaning in every sentence. But he also wasn't naive enough to believe everything would magically heal. Just because he loved her hard enough. Some wounds cannot be fixed by hope. Some fractures only need one more small pressure to shatter completely. Their future now hung like a taut wire stretched between two buildings. On one side were love, history, the promises they had fought to keep, the moments they had refused to abandon each other. On the other side were truth, betrayal, and the unbearable feeling of being excluded from the most important part of your partner's life. Jacob knew that whatever he chose, he would lose something. If he forgave too quickly, he might lose himself, lose the boundaries a marriage needs in order to stay safe. If he lashed out and pushed Naomi away, he might lose her at the exact moment she needed him most. There was no clean option, no painless path. And when Jacob looked down at the report one last time, he understood something chilling. This was no longer only about a positive BRCA result. It was about Naomi choosing loneliness even though she had a husband. It was about Jacob facing the question that would haunt any viewer. Watching this unfold, what do you do when the person you love is both the victim of fear and the one who has hurt you the most? Do you step closer to save them, or step back to save yourself? Jacob folded the paper carefully, almost too carefully. Like even wrinkling it might trigger an explosion. He placed it somewhere Naomi couldn't miss the moment she walked back in. Then he stood there, perfectly still, listening to his own heartbeat like a warning bell. Because in that moment, Jacob knew Naomi would return, believing she still controlled the story until her eyes fell on the truth Jacob had left behind. And the world she had tried to hold together with a lie would begin to collapse. Right in front of them. The Beyond the Gates CBS Spoilers channel specializes in analyzing, theorizing, and discussing plot points in the series from the perspective of a longtime fan. This allows viewers to gain deeper, more objective, and interesting insights. Subscribe to the channel to stay updated on the latest news about the series.